Hey everyone, in this video we're going to talk about the Corvid conspiracy. The Corvids came in the Underworld expansion, so they've been out for a little while now, but because of certain reasons, a lot of playgroups haven't had a chance to get together and get the Corvids to the table yet, but let me just say that they are really fun, they're pretty easy to learn, and I think that they're one of the most interesting factions because of all the different interactions that they present with their hidden plots, which we'll talk about. So, thematically and ornithologically, the Corvid conspiracy are a breakaway group from the Eerie dynasties. Something must have happened, some kind of disagreement, and the Corvids decided, hey, we're going to be our own faction. And rather than using raw military power, they use trickery and subterfuge in order to try to suppress the woodland and gain control. So let's take a look at their components. It's pretty simple. They have 15 warriors, and they have 8 plot tokens. In your Underworld expansion, you might think, wait a second, I have 16 plot tokens. Well, Leader Games included a full set of spares, so you're not actually supposed to play with all 16 of them, you just play with 8 of them. All the tokens have a backside, which you can see, they're all in the face down position now, and a front side, which corresponds to the different plot types. So you have 2 bombs that you'll play with, 2 snares, 2 extortions, and 2 raids. Whenever the Corvids put a token on the map, it's going to be in the face down position so that no one can actually see what kind of plot you've placed. Only you get to know this. So it adds this sort of suspense and an unknown factor to the board. However, because they can be exposed by other factions if they figure out what you've placed face down, you want to be a little bit bluffing. You want to put down something that's going to be unexpected, because if you're too transparent, then your opponents are going to be able to shut you down very easily. All right, let's jump straight into their setup. As we can see, again, the Marquise Turn is our stock opponent, and they have chosen these 3 clearings as their homelands. So next we're going to go to the Corvid setup. On the back of the faction board, you're going to see the old setup system, which would have been written, you just place a warrior in a clearing of each suit. So 1 warrior would go in fox, 1 warrior would go in mouse, and 1 warrior would go in rabbit. So you could put them anywhere you wanted on the map, even into somewhere where an enemy had already started, besides the keep, of course. So 1 would go in fox, 1 would go in mouse. They wouldn't necessarily need to be connected. 1 could go in rabbit all the way down here. That's the old setup. However, we're going to be going with advanced setup because it's 2022 and we're sort of migrating the root community over to advanced setup. But also very important is that the Corvids are kind of a weak underdog faction, so they were given a little bit of a buff that really helps them a lot in the early game. The first step is choose a homeland clearing, put 1 warrior and 1 plot token of your choice face down there. This is really nice because now we've been given an additional plot token to start the game, so we can get going with crafting and flipping and scoring on our very first turn. So, of course, it is a homeland, therefore it cannot be any of the cat's homelands because homelands can never intersect. So we're going to take a warrior and we're going to choose one of our plot tokens and we're going to have it face down in our homeland. And notice there's no placement restrictions. We could place it anywhere, even adjacent to an enemy homeland if we wanted to. And it doesn't have to be on the map edge either. I'm going to choose this plot token. I'll talk about what it does in a moment. And of course, it starts face down, and I'm going to place it right here. Face down with a warrior. Then the second step of the setup is put 1 warrior in a clearing of each suit. Counting the previous step, place 4 in total. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Now these are the warriors that are going to be placed in each of the suits. 1 could be in the exact same clearing. So this is going to be our bunny warrior. Then we can have 1 in mouse if we wanted. And then fox. We could choose to go up here in Russia, or we could just go up in the corner, or we could even go right on top of the sawmill. That's fun. Why don't we do that? just to keep in mind, you are allowed to place pieces into enemy clearings as long as it's not your homeland and it's not the keep. Okay? And that completes the Corvid setup. And of course, we would discard our hands down to 3. So I've chosen to keep Swap Meet, Boat Builders, and False Orders because all of these are really fun cards with the Corvids. Okay? Now let's take our Corvid's first turn. The first step is craft. That's right. The Corvids craft in Birdsong. They are the first and so far only faction that gets to craft in Birdsong, and that unlocks some interesting capabilities. So the plot tokens are our crafting pieces, and it doesn't matter whether they're face up or face down. They're all the same when it comes to crafting. So we're going to use this face down plot token as our rabbit crafting piece, and we're going to craft Swap Meet. Okay, tuck that up here. Take the rest of our cards and we'll just put them back in our hand. And that's it. We've exhausted our one rabbit crafter. We move on to the next step, which is flip. This is the primary scoring method for the Corvid conspiracy, is they can flip a face down token face up, never back face down, right? It only flips in one direction. So once it's face up permanently. And you can flip this one, for example. Keep in mind, the biggest rules mistake for the Corvids that people forget is that you are only able to flip plot tokens if there is at least one warrior of your own in the clearing. Okay, you have to have a Corvid warrior. If, for example, I got battled and this plot token were undefended or defenseless, I cannot flip this because there's no Corvid warrior. But because I've set up, I'm going first. I do have a warrior. I'm able to flip this token. So you flip it face up, and it is an extortion. Okay? Let's talk about what extortion does, because some plot tokens have an effect upon flipping it. Okay? And extortion is one of them. So when you look at the board, it says, when flipped, take a random card from each player who has any pieces in its clearing. So currently, the Marquise is the only player who has pieces in this faction. So I'm able to steal a card from the Marquise's hand. In 3-4 player games, you could actually steal from all 3 of the players and get 3 extra cards right here in your Birdsong. Of course, it's after the crafting step, so I can't then craft those cards. So I'm going to go ahead and steal this card from the Marquise's hand. All right, it's a Saboteur's. Cycles right into our hand, and that's it. We have nothing else to flip. However, like I said, this is the scoring method. So when you flip any tokens, you score a victory point for every face-up token on the map, including itself. So with that, I score 1 victory point. As an example, if I had another token right here with the warrior, if I flipped this one, I would get 1 point. If I flipped another token on the same go, I would score an additional 2 points because now it is face up and so is the first one. So I would actually get a total of 3 points. So that's how you count it out. So 1, 2, 3. And then of course you can do the math yourself. If I were able to flip this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you could score big points as the Corvids if you're able to flip a whole bunch of tokens on the same turn. Keep in mind, they don't have to all be in the same turn. They just have to remain face up. So on a later turn, if this is still here, it could feed into future big point bursts. So you want to try to defend your face up tokens because they make the face down tokens more valuable when you flip. So we've only flipped this one. This is our last token. That's it. Then we move on to recruit. The recruiting of the Corvids is really good. You simply discard 1 card, and then you can recruit 4 warriors, or usually 4 warriors, 1 to each of the clearings of that suit. So I could discard any of these cards. I think I'm going to just throw away that Saboteur's we got. So I'm going to discard the Saboteur's, and it being a bird card, I can choose one of the suits. So I see that the keep has, or one of the rabbit clearings has the keep in it. So if I chose rabbit, I could recruit one here, one here, one here, but because I can't place a piece in the keep, I would only get to recruit 3. So I'm not going to recruit in rabbit. Instead, I think I'm just going to recruit in mouse. Fox. Let's choose fox. That'll be fun. 1, 2, 3, and 4. There we go. All right, so now we've done the recruit step, and then we move on to daylight. However, whoa, rewind. I crafted swap meet, remember? So swap meet is a card that for most other factions, you craft it and then you have to wait another turn before you can use it because it has a Birdsong activation. But because the Corvids crafted in Birdsong, I can actually use swap meet on the same turn that I crafted it. And that's because it says once in Birdsong. If it were worded differently that said, for example, saboteurs, you can see this says at start of Birdsong. If I craft saboteurs in my crafting step, I'm not able to then play it immediately because then I'm no longer at the start of Birdsong, I'm in my crafting step. So saboteurs and Better Burrow Bank actually in the base deck are cards that say at start of Birdsong, therefore you can't use them the same turn. But cards like Swap Meet or false orders that say in Birdsong, that can be used at any time in Birdsong. So it can actually happen after the crafting step. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to look inside the Marquise de Cat's hand and I'm going to grab Corvid Planners. How ironic. I actually really like these 2 cards in my hand, so I'm going to throw that back. But that's fine. That's one of the benefits of having Birdsong crafting. And with that out of the way, let's go on to daylight. The Corvids have 4 possible actions that they can take in daylight, and they can choose 3. And of course, they can do multiple of a given action. So one of the actions is move. So of course, you can move 3 times if you want. That's a basic move action. However, the Corvids have a very special ability, and that's nimble. So that is the same ability that the Vagabond has, where they can move around regardless of rule. That's huge for an insurgent faction that doesn't have a lot of warriors. So right now, the Corvids do not rule this clearing because they're tied for presence. I actually really like this color combination of orange and purple. I'm just realizing it now. But still, I could just move the Corvids all around the map without worrying about rule at all. Very, very nice. And it's part of why I really like giving them to newer players because it's one fewer thing to worry about. So that's the move action. Battle, it's a standard battle. You roll the dice and you do the thing. Ooh, 3-3. So 2 of the actions you probably already understand. It's the same as almost every other faction. But the key action I want to highlight is plot. Plot is the action that you use to place more tokens on the map face down, and then in preparation for a future flip, which of course has to happen in Birdsong. So because of the order, you can never flip a token that you've placed on the same turn. You place in daylight and you flip in Birdsong. So the way that plot works is you choose a clearing where you have Corvid warriors. You remove a Corvid warrior to place a plot token. So it's a little bit similar to organize. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plot up here. You take the Corvid warrior off the map and you get to place a token. Why don't we place this one face down? Okay. Keep in mind, I won't actually be able to flip this at the way it's set up right now because there's no warrior, but we're not going to worry about that for right now. Okay. So I've plotted once. However, if I choose to plot again in the same turn, I would have to remove a second warrior. So for every plot you place on the map in the same turn, it costs an extra warrior. So if I wanted to plot here, I'd have to remove both of them to put another plot token. Okay, so I'm going to do that, I think. We're going to plot, take 2 warriors for the second plot in this turn, and we're going to put this one down. Okay, I've now taken 2 of my daylight actions. I only have 1 left. And I think that one action is going to be to move. We're going to move this guy like that. Okay? That's the end of our daylight actions. Now we arrive at evening. The first thing that says in evening is exert. You may take an extra daylight action. Oh, wait a second. Now I can take a fourth action. That's great. But if you do so, you do not draw cards during the next step. Ugh. So every turn you have the decision to take an extra action or draw your cards. And the Corvids have pretty decent card draw. So it's a tough decision, but I think I'm going to actually do it. I'm going to exert. So I'm going to exert to take another move. I'm going to move this Corvid there. Now I'm going to be able to flip that on the next turn. Hooray! So then I've done my exert. I move on to draw. However, I don't get to draw any cards because I decided to exert. So that was my last action. I end my turn. And now let's move on to the Marquise de Cat's turn. The Marquise de Cat, of course, generates a wood. And now, we've got some trouble because the Corvids have 2 face-down plots on the map right now. What do we do? Well, they are tokens, and therefore you can remove them in any way that a token can normally be removed. So battle is one of them. The Vagabond can use the crossbow, or a favor card, or a Woodland Alliance Revolt. They just work the same way as other tokens. So the cats are going to use their first action to battle this token. So of course they have to ask, do you have an ambush? Oh wait, sorry. First thing I wanted to do for the cats, they're going to actually craft Charm Offensive. So we're going to tuck that over to the side. The cats have crafted Charm Offensive. Now we move on to our daylight actions. They're going to battle the token. Do you have an ambush? Caw, caw, no! So they don't technically have to roll dice because it's undefended, so they deal an extra hit no matter what, and they're going to be able to remove this plot token. But let's just do it for fun. 1-0. Okay. So they remove the plot token because they rolled a 1. However, when plot tokens are face down, they have a little bit of a disincentive mechanism called embedded agents. So in battle, as the defender, the Corvids deal an additional hit when they're attacked, no matter what, as long as there is a face-down token. Okay, and there is, so even though there's no warriors in this clearing, 1 cat is lost. Ugh! But the plot is removed, and what kind of plot was it? Well, there's only 1 plot that actually activates when it's removed in battle like this, and that is the raid. Okay? So if it were any of the other plot types, like if it's a bomb, a snare, or an extortion, it would just be removed, and the Corvids don't even have to say what it was. They would just say it's not a raid and take it off and keep it hidden. But they're kind of happy to have this removed because the effect of a raid is, let's read it. When removed, which it just is, place 1 warrior in each adjacent clearing. So, ooh, that's so nice. So not only did the cats have to lose a warrior to take that action, we now get to place a warrior in all adjacent clearings of ours. So it was that clearing, so we get a Corvid in here, a Corvid in here, and oh bother, it's the keep, so no warrior in that clearing. What a shame, but such is the life of the Corvids. Okay, so that's one way of removing it. Just keep in mind that embedded agents only works on face-down plot tokens. Had the Marquise de Cat decided to attack here, because this token is face up, that would not happen. Okay? Next, the Marquise de Cat is still a little bit concerned about this token up here, and they don't really want to battle because they're not going to be able to deal enough hits to take it out, because they only have 1 warrior and they need to deal 2 in order to remove it. There's another mechanism that all the enemies of the Corvids can use to remove tokens. And what's even crazier is it doesn't even cost them 1 of their actions, and that is exposure. So the way that exposure works is that any time on your turn, let's say that I'm the cats, anytime on the cat's turn, before drawing cards in evening, you may show a card in your hand to the Corvids to guess what kind of plot it is. If you're correct, the plot is removed and you score the victory point because you've oh, you're only supposed to be here. Oh, and the cat's actually scored a victory point for removing the plot. If you're correct with your guess, you keep the card that you showed the Corvids and the plot is removed. If it's a raid, it doesn't activate. And of course, you score a victory point because you've removed a token. However, if you're incorrect with your guess, you have to give the card to the Corvids. So this one mechanism is what incentivizes the Corvids to kind of play suboptimally by placing plots in areas where they wouldn't necessarily be the most powerful, just because they don't want to be exposed with what they're doing. Okay, so the cats are actually going to do that. They're going to show this card. It's not face up, by the way. It's just a privately viewed thing that only the Corvids player gets to see. Psst, psst, psst. I'm making an exposure attempt at this. Okay, is that a bomb? And of course, the Corvids player is allowed to privately inspect the token if they forget. It's not a bomb. Okay, so you don't have to tell them what it is. You just say, no, it's not a bomb. Thank you. You get the card and it gets added to your hand. So, the Marquise de Cat is getting a little bit nervous. So what do? Well, if it's not a bomb, let's make another exposure attempt. So you're allowed to do this as many times as you want, provided that you have cards in your hand that match the clearing. And of course, it's a fox clearing, so it would have to be a fox or a bird card. So not that this is a great idea, but I'm going to show the Corvids another card and say, is that extortion? Haha, no, it's not an extortion. So you get the card again. And of course, now that helps the other players at the table, if you're playing a 4-player game, figure out what that is, because now we know it's not a bomb, it's not an extortion, so that only leaves 2 options, okay? This is the part where having only 2 plots matters a lot, because if, for example, we had 2 extortions out on the map, then we know that this plot cannot be an extortion. So you can sort of rule it out in that way and be better at deducing what that could be. But also there's a lot of reverse psychology going on with the Corvids. So that's it. The Marquise de Cat is out of cards that match the clearing. They can no longer make any attempts at guessing that plot. So they're going to go through their actions. Maybe they want to build something. Remember, they've battled once. That was an action, but the exposure attempts are not actions. They spend that, they get a wood, and then they'll recruit. Why not? There you go. That sounds like a good turn. And now the cats have finished Daylight. But remember, we crafted Charm Offensive. So let's do that. We will draw a card for the Marquise de Cat. Hee. And then they're going to give the point to the Corvids, the only opponent. Let's say that this is a card that they say, wait a second, I would like to now make another exposure attempt at this plot. The cats are not allowed to do that because they have drawn a card in Evening. Even if it's not their final cards, of course, right? They're going to draw another card for their normal card draw at the end of Evening, but they drew one with Charm Offensive. Charm Offensive counts as drawing a card in Evening, and therefore you're not allowed to make any more exposure attempts, okay? This is another thing that people get wrong. They think that because of the phrasing in Evening, they're only allowed making guesses in Evening. That's not true. You can make an exposure attempt anytime on your turn, but the moment you draw a card and it's Evening, no more guesses. So this goes for if you're the Woodland Alliance, for example, and you move with your warriors along the ferry on the lake map, and you draw a card for that, then you're also no longer allowed to make exposure attempts. So it's a kind of funny thing that it just is able to block exposure attempts after that point. Okay, so that's it. We're no longer allowed to make exposure attempts, and we are finished. Now let's do the Corvid's next turn. Okay, so craft using plots face up or down. We're going to go ahead and craft false orders because we now have a plot in Fox. So we're going to craft that. And like I said, because it just says in Birdsong, you're actually allowed to activate false orders right now. So I could spend it right after crafting in order to move warriors of the enemy, which is what false orders does. I'm going to move this guy right into there. And that's it. I can do that right after my crafting step is finished, or while the crafting step is still going on, actually. I can't craft anything else because I only have one piece left and none of it matches. So I'm going to move on to flip. Now I'm going to flip this token because it's face down and I had a Corvid warrior. So first of all, I score 2 points because there are now 2 plot tokens face up. 1, 2. And it is a snare. Let's talk about what snares do for a moment. So a snare, unlike an extortion, has no effect when you flip it. It's not like you flip it and something triggers. What happens is while it's face up, it has a passive effect. So while face up, enemy pieces cannot be placed in or moved from its clearing. So it's kind of similar to the keep, actually, where even though the Marquise Turn rules here, rules here, they even rule this clearing where there's a snare, but they're not allowed to build here because of the snare. So the snare would block them from being able to build, but it also blocks them from being able to move out. Okay, so these 2 warriors are stuck until this snare is removed. All right, snares are a bit of a complex one in how they interact, so let's do a few more examples. Let's say that I had flipped the snare in this clearing. If it stayed there, on the cat's next turn, this sawmill would not generate a wood because that constitutes placing a piece, right? So that's blocked by the snare. However, if let's say there was a wood there left over and I was able to flip the plot and now it becomes a snare, again, the sawmill will not generate more wood and the Marquise Turn, despite ruling the clearing, cannot build here. This wood can still be spent. And that's because it's not technically moving. You're just spending into, it just has to be connected to where you want to build via ruled clearings. So let's say that I wanted to build here as the cats. I could still spend this wood, no problem, because this is not moving from, it's just being removed, right? In order to understand snares well, you have to get this down. The difference between placing and moving in. So you're allowed to move in, you just can't move out, and you cannot place. So again, let's say that the snare were over here. If the cats took the recruit action, then you can't place any warriors here. This recruiter is locked. So snares can cause a lot of really difficult movement and placement problems for a lot of factions, particularly the Eerie dynasties, for example. So snares can be a real thorn in the side for a lot of people. And that's why they're actually my favorite plot. Let's say that we had a vagabond in play. Hello! So this vagabond is a pawn, not a warrior. However, a vagabond can still move around. And it also moves from clearings. If the vagabond ever enters an area with the snare, during daylight, it is not allowed to leave because it's still an enemy piece. So an enemy piece cannot move. The vagabond is basically stuck here. However, the only way for a vagabond to leave the clearing would be in slip. So it specifically says this in the law, that during slip, which is of course Vagabond's Birdsong Movement, that's free of boots and everything, you can leave a snared clearing. And keep in mind, the Vagabond is allowed to explore the ruin and take the item, because again, that is removing a piece, not moving a piece out. Very important. So the Vagabond can explore ruins, but cannot leave the clearing outside of slip. And here's another, this is a funky one. If the Woodland Alliance is in the game, Woodland Alliance moves in, the Woodland Alliance cannot move out. And if they choose to organize, they cannot place a sympathy token here. However, when you look at the wording of organize, it doesn't say replace a warrior with a token. It just says remove a warrior, which is legal. It's not blocked by the snare. Remove a warrior and place a token. But because the snare only blocks the placement of a token, you can still take the organize action to remove the warrior. Why would you ever do this? I don't know. Let's say that you were really desperate to recruit back at the Woodland Alliance base and a battle is too risky in case you rolled, like 2-0, then sure, you took out a warrior, but you didn't actually kill your own warrior in the battle. So a way to guarantee the removal of a warrior is just say, I'm going to organize and not place a token here. That's something that you can do, which is really funny. However, there are a few things that cannot be done like this. One of them is the lizard cult's convert and sanctify action. So if we had a clearing like this, and the lizards wanted to convert this cat or sanctify this building, they would not be able to remove the pieces and then say, oh, well, I guess the snare prevents me from placing the garden, but I'm still going to attack your building. I'm still going to sanctify your building and just not place a garden. No. That's because sanctify, convert. Encamp for the badgers, for the keepers in iron, they have an encamp action, and anoint, which is a warlord action. All right, those 4 actions use the terminology replace. This is a new term in the Marauder expansion, the Marauder version of the law, that if you cannot complete the whole action, which is removing something and replacing another, then you can't even initiate the action. So the keepers in iron would not be able to remove an action or remove a warrior to encamp, because the snare would prevent the latter part of encampment, just like how the snare prevents the placement of a garden for sanctify. So snares do a lot of very interesting things to the map. And the last plot token, and probably the one you've been waiting for, is the bomb. The bomb does pretty much what you're expecting it to. If I've got a warrior down here and a face down plot token, when flipped, remove all enemy pieces in its clearing, then remove the token. Ooh, so if I flipped it, it's a bomb. It removes the warriors and the building, scoring me a point. However, it's then removed. But of course, I still score 2 points, right? 1, 2, but it's removed. And that removal makes bombs a little bit tricky because unlike all the other plots that when you flip them, they stay face up, and then you could potentially flip more later and score more points. The bombs are removed when you flip them, so you should always flip them last if you're going to flip a whole series of plot tokens on the same turn, because then you maximize your point gain from it. Keep in mind, a lot of people think this. If an enemy battles the bomb and say, I'm going to attack that, if it's a bomb, it doesn't activate. I know people want it to, but that doesn't work. The bomb only blows everything up if you can successfully flip it. Just remember that only the raid is what activates if it's battled. And if an enemy is able to correctly guess a plot token, while it's face down, of course, then no effect happens. No raid, no bomb, no nothing. And one more thing that the Corvids can do, and this is their last daylight action, is trick. Not last daylight action, just the last one for me to explain, is that one of their 3 actions that they can take is trick. And trick is very cool because you can switch the positions of 2 plot tokens on the map. So let's say I had a snare over here, and I would actually rather it be somewhere else. I can take 2 plots and for one of my actions, switch their positions. Hooah! The restriction is that the plots have to be in the same direction, meaning that they have to both be face up like this, or both be face down in order to flip them, okay? In order to trick them, I should say. So if one of them is face up and one of them is face down like this, then they cannot be tricked, okay? They both have to be in the same face up position or face down position. And the other benefit of extortions, I should add, is not just when you flip it, you steal cards, but this is your extra card draw. So in evening, if you choose to not exert, then you actually get to draw cards. You draw 1 card plus 1 for every face-up extortion. That's another reason to protect these and keep them face up, because the Corvids would be able to draw 2 cards should they not exert. Having 3 extortions might sound really great because then you could draw 3 cards, or 2 extortions gives you 3 cards in evening. However, of course, like we talked about, that really helps the enemies figure out what any potential face down plot token is, because it gives a lot of information. Let's do a few more examples of interactions with certain cards with the Corvid conspiracy. So like I said, with false orders crafted, you can use it on the exact same turn you crafted, which is a very powerful way to surprise your enemies, because otherwise for every other faction, they have to kind of plan around a false order that's on the table. One really funny thing that I've seen done is you can craft false orders and then use it immediately to move a whole bunch of enemies onto a clearing with a face down extortion, and then immediately flip the extortion so that you get to steal a card for them. And this will make them mad, but it's a really nice tip to be able to do, and it's kind of gonna elicit a laugh. Next one is Charm Offensive. So Charm Offensive is great for the Corvids because they're often having to choose between drawing cards and doing that extra action with Exert. But just remember that Charm Offensive's timing is at the start of evening. So if you want to use Charm Offensive and Exert, make sure that you draw the card at the start of evening before Exert happens. So you would take your 3 actions, then you'd activate Charm Offensive, take the card, give the point, and then decide if you want to Exert to take another action. Okay, so don't forget that. A really fun one that I didn't have a chance to highlight when I was at the map is Boat Builders. Boat Builders is a great craft for any faction that needs to move around a lot because it can save you time by moving along the river. But if you see, it just says you treat rivers as paths. That's not just for movement, that's for any kind of purpose. So let's say that you had Boat Builders crafted and then someone destroyed a raid. Ha! You would get to spread warriors to all adjacent clearings. But because you've crafted Boat Builders, you get to also place warriors that are adjacent via the river. So that's a huge benefit if a raid goes off. So if you can craft Boat Builders, a raid on the lake, for example, of the lake map, or in an area that now is connected to 5 or 6 clearings when it used to be connected to maybe 3 or 4, this becomes really, really nice and a great way to recruit warriors really quickly. And the last one I want to talk about is Tunnels. Tunnels is a great card for the Corvids because it allows them to move their warriors around a lot faster because all of their plot tokens might be scattered around the map and they're all crafting pieces. However, before you start getting ideas of, oh my god, if someone destroys a raid because they're all adjacent, doesn't that mean a warrior goes to all the plot tokens too? No, because the way it happens is, let's say you've got tunnels crafted. If someone destroys the raid is gone before the placement of the warriors. Therefore, you wouldn't, that clearing where the raid is no longer adjacent to all of the other clearings with plot tokens. So nice try. I wanted that to be true, but yeah, when you think about it, it makes sense that Tunnels doesn't interact with the raids that way. Just wanted to have you guys keep in mind that I was playing with all of my plot tokens face up, but of course you would never actually do that when you're playing. Everything is going to be face down, so your opponents, they have no idea what you're putting out on the map and how to figure out the ways to expose you. And that's really everything that I wanted to talk about with the Corvid Conspiracy. They're not that complex of a faction to learn. In fact, when we look at the back of the faction map, it actually says complexity low. And this makes them a really nice faction to give to new players. The only thing is remembering what the plot tokens do, but the limited actions and the easy movement makes them really fun and fluid to figure out. And if you can win with the Corvids, you have my respect, because this is a difficult faction to play well, but you have to be creative. You have to do crazy things. You have to be willing to lie and bluff and cheat and kill. Anything you have to do to win with the Corvids, it is a-okay as far as I'm concerned. So good luck, and I'll catch you guys next time.